Okay, so in this session we're going to be looking at null objects, and we're going to work a little bit more in the graph editor as well. Predominantly we're looking at null objects, but I'd like you all to start getting a little bit more used to just playing about with the graph. You can't really break anything in there. Go against what I usually do, and always save, and you can always revert back to previous saves if you do break it. So I've made some assets for this tutorial. So I've made them in Illustrator. Hopefully you remember how to import them. Right clicking in the project area, import, file, navigate to the assets made in Illustrator, single click on them, and then import as composition retain layer sizes, and then just click import. That'll bring it into your project area, double click, and we've got a full scene to work with. So what we're going to be doing in this scene is 100% working with the box and none of the other assets, but they are still layers, just so we can have things in front, like the box in front and landing on the floor and that sort of stuff. So we can lock down everything else. You can do that with, in the bottom left hand corner, the little lock icon, all of the squares below that. If you just click, you can lock them all down, or if you click and slide, click and hold, you can lock them a little bit faster that way as well. So we're just working with the box. What we're going to have is the box fly in from this side and then roll along, and then maybe do a little slide at the end, just as it exits, as if the delivery man has just thrown it across. So it's a little bit close to this side to start off with. So I'm going to hold shift, and using V, my selection tool, I'm going to drag it maybe to about there. Okay, doesn't really matter where you put it, but we need a bit of an arch for the trajectory of the initial throw, and then we're going to have it roll afterwards. So we need a bit of space on this side, and we need some space for it to come in on this side. So that's looking pretty good. We're going to hit we're going to start using shortcuts a little bit more now, because as our scenes get more filled, you can't afford to be clicking in with the down arrow and then clicking again, having all of this open, and you might have several other layers with the same stuff going on. It becomes a little bit hectic to manage. So remember, you can close all. Triple tapping U will give you the last thing that you had selected and that sort of stuff. But for this purpose, the shortcut that we're going to be using is P with the box layer selected, and that's just going to open our position layer without all of the other stuff that we're not necessarily using currently. So this is where our box is going to end. So I'm going to hit shift page down 3 times, shift page down or shift page down or shift page up. Increment your timeline by 10 frames. If you're to do it just without the shift, that's 1 single frame. Okay, so and I've lost my timeline there we go. So put it back to 0 and then shift page down 3 times, and because our scene is at 29.97 frames a second, that will take us to 1 second. There or thereabout, it'll round itself up to exactly 1 second, which is good. You're more than welcome to work in 60 frames a second and all that sort of stuff, but your timings will not be the same as mine because there's more frames to work with. Therefore, it won't be a second. It'll be half a second because you've got double the amount of frames. For now, I'm just going to work in roughly 30 frames a second for the purposes of these tutorials. So we're at 1 second. I'm going to click the stopwatch to get our keyframe in and all of the rest of the stuff. Then I'm going to throw the timeline back to 0 and place the box where I want it to begin, which is outside of the scene, as if it's being thrown by someone from roughly this height. If I just zoom out, holding Alt and rolling backwards on my mouse wheel, and then can hold spacebar and just click anywhere just to move this around. And then we can test our first animation. Okay, so doesn't really look like it's being thrown. It looks like it's got a very, very straight line, as it has, and its momentum is pretty much constant throughout that. So first and foremost, if someone was throwing something, it wouldn't come in as a straight object, keeping the bottom of it at the floor. So let's bring our rotation tool in. Here's another shortcut. If I was to press R with this layer selected, it's going to remove my position one and just give me my rotation one. Now I want to be able to see my position keyframes. I'm just going to press P again. So R is rotation, P is position, shortcuts for those layers, those sub layers in a layer. And I'm going to hit Shift and R instead, and Shift will say you want to keep anything you've got open, currently visible, and we'll add that one in as well. So if I was to do it the other way around, I'd hit Shift and P, and that'd bring that up. Hopefully that makes sense. It's very late at the moment. So we've been working with, well, I'm just going to set a keyframe here now, seeing as we're at 0 frames. I've been working with these numbers down here, these variables down here, to make all my rotations and that sort of stuff. I'm going to give you another shortcut. You can click it up here if you choose to, the rotate tool, which is W. And we can just do that in the scene. And I'm just going to have it roughly angled like that. And then when it comes in, I'm going to bring it to 1 second. And then I want it to land on this side here. So I'm just going to rotate it as best I can by eye. Then I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to hit V. And that's my selection tool. And I'm just going to bring it up to where the land is. And that's looking pretty good. You can be as precise as you want with this, but for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm just going to eyeball it. So when we hit that, it's coming in. Still doesn't really have the trajectory that I want it to have, though. It's still coming in at a straight line, really, isn't it? So we've got that movement already. I'm going to give it this line here. I'm going to give it a bit of a curve like that. Okay. So in order to do that, we need to separate the X and Y axes from our position. So if you remember back to GCSE maths or O-level maths or whatever your flavour was, the X and Y is X is up and down, I believe, and Y is left and right. I might have those completely the wrong way around. In fact, I think I do. In fact, I definitely do. X is left and right, and Y is up and down. So we're just going to right click on position, and we're going to hit separate dimensions. And now our position is has 2 layers: the Y position, which is up and down, and the X position, which is left and right. So why have we done that? That gives us more versatility when we enter into the graph editor, which we're going to be doing shortly. So with the Y position selected, we don't need the X position for this one. With the Y position selected, so if you want all the keyframes selecting on that layer, just click on it. It'll select those for you. We can then enter into the graph editor. Now in the bouncing ball tutorial, if I just go down to the second one over here, the choose graph type and options, we were working in the speed graph. So that was the grey set of arches that we worked in, if you remember back to that. We're going to be working in the value graph today, and this one hopefully should be a little bit more visual, and it should show you exactly what you're doing when you make edits in here onto this animation here. So we've got a straight line indicating that it has a constant momentum from start to finish. So it goes from 0 to momentum to 0 again with no variance, no change whatsoever. So we're going to make alterations here. We're going to hold down the Alt key over one of either the start or the end anchor points, the green dots. And when you hold down Alt and click and drag, it's going to drag a handle out for you. So if you can do that in both of those, for both of those, sorry, and we're looking, And hopefully you can see as I'm dragging this, it is changing the trajectory of that line that we've made. So I'm going to make something that's quite nice and arched. Probably something a bit like that. That could be quite nice. I'll just give that a little bit more. That could be cool. Come out of the graph editor and you'll notice that those keyframes that we've been playing with are now sundials. That's not the right thing, is it? Egg timers, that's the one. It's very late. So when I hit spacebar, it's going to have that trajectory now, which is looking kind of cool, looking good. But yeah, the reason why it's turned into egg timers is there's been alterations made to that animation, just like when we hit F9 for easy easing, just to let you know you've made alterations in there. It's not just a straightforward keyframe. Cool. So hopefully that's all making sense so far. So we've had our first enter into the graph editor, and we've done hopefully some familiar things at this point, which are just simply rotation and position, but with the added benefit of learning how we can right click on our position and separate the dimensions for that in order to have more control in our graph editor. Good stuff. Okay, so next we're going to incorporate something called a null object. This is probably going to be brand new to you if you've been following with the tutorials. We've not mentioned these before. And I'll bring one into the scene and then I'll explain what it is. So we're going to deselect all of our layers, right click anywhere underneath, new, null object. That should bring in this dotted red square for you. So what is a null object? It is an object that doesn't really technically exist on the screen. If we were to render out the video, you won't render null objects, you won't be able to see them or anything like that, but we can attach them to objects within our scene to give different forms of animation that we'd probably struggle with if we were trying to just do all of the animation within the one layer. So if we were trying to, once we've done all of our, once we've done all of our keyframing for this initial throw, if we were then going to try and rotate the box and make it rotate from here and bring this corner down here, we would have to come up here, use our anchor point tool, bring that down into the corner, pull it down, and then move along and then reposition our anchor point tool. It becomes a real headache. Whereas if you can, whilst null objects can be a little bit tricky at first, once you've got your head into it a little bit, these things can become really, really easy, and you can do kind of complex animations much, much quicker. Again, that obviously comes with confidence, but we'll get that confidence today, hopefully. So with my selection tool, V selected, notice how the target is in the top left-hand corner of your null object. Just leave it there, that's absolutely fine. Click and drag from the target, and I'll zoom in so you can see a bit better. We're going to try and get this as close to the corner of the box as possible. Okay. So bring it up. So with the null, in fact, whilst we're here, null 1, click that layer, hit return, and call that rotation 1. This is going to be our first rotation using a null object, and we're going to use 3 null objects in total to get the full turn. So with that rotation 1 layer selected, press R, and that'll bring up your rotation tool. And then before we do anything with this, we're going to do something called parenting using the parent pick whip. So we've been working in the software for a couple of weeks now, and you may have seen these little swirls and parent and link. We've not mentioned them before, but this is a really, really handy way to do animations, especially if you were doing character animations. So parenting the hand to the forearm. I know you can't actually see that. The hand, the hand to the forearm to the upper arm. And so that's the parent of that. You know, the forearm can't do anything without the upper arm, and the hand can't move anywhere without moving the forearm. So that's what we mean by a parent-child relationship. So it's very easy to do in After Effects. All you need to do to parent one object to the other, whichever one you want the child to be, you take the pick whip. So click and hold on this little swirly icon on the top layer, not inside any of these guys, and just click and drag that to the one that you want to be the parent. In this case, it's going to be the null object rotation 1. So now we've done that, make sure we're at the end of our, make sure your box looks like that, and we're at 1 second exactly where our first animation ends, and we're going to check the rotation stopwatch on the null object rotation 1. We're going to press W, and we're animating the null object now. So we're not coming up here to try and rotate the box, we're rotating the null object. So click and hold in there, and you should see that it's grabbed hold of it, and you can just bring your box over there. And again, you can be as precise as you want. I know mine's not quite on there. I just drag that. See, I'm kind of snapping there. Oh, might have got one there. That's all good. Okay, so I've just realised that I've just rotated it on the initial bit, which is good. So, so what I'll do is I'll just drag that one over there. In fact, no, I'm just going to Control Z all that. This is the greatest tutorial ever. I'll just hit Shift page down a couple of times. 20 frames should be absolutely fine, and then I'll do my rotation. There we go. Obviously, I'm going to edit that bit out. Can't be seen to not know what I'm talking about. There we go. Okay, hopefully that should work now. Yeah, lovely. Okay, so notice how the null object stays there. It only comes into play when this initial keyframe is set off. So it's just going to wait there, and it's going to grab hold of it, grab hold of the box as soon as it gets there. Brilliant. So because of the way the box comes in, whilst that looks fairly decent, the fact that it's just standing on a pin there and doesn't have any movement to the right looks a little bit odd. So we'll add a bit of movement into that one, I think. So we'll hold Shift and P to bring up position, but keep our rotation keyframes there. And straight off the bat, we're going to right click on position, and we're going to separate keyframes. We're only going to need the X in this situation, so I'm at the initial start of the animation for the null object, so I'm just going to check the stopwatch, and I'll press U, and that should hide any unused ones, in this case the Y position, because we don't need that. And then I will come over here and press V for my selection tool and drag that, and I'm going to hold Shift as I drag it about that far. Let's see how that looks. Maybe a bit too far. Oh. That's better. Cool. So we'll just select our X position layer and go into the graph editor, and we're going to hold Alt and just bring those handles out again. Okay, and I think if we have that one pointing up slightly, that one horizontal, should give it, want it to be a bit plonkier, so go like that maybe. Let's try that again. Don't do what I did there. Just try and get it a nice curve like that. It's not coming down as much as I want, but that's okay. We can play with that later. Cool. So how do we add a new null object in here, and do we have to go through all that again? Not all of it, which is the good news. Hover over your last keyframes on rotation 1, and then we're going to hit Control and D, and that's going to duplicate our null object. I just press U just to bring this down. So by duplicating that, it's kept all of the keyframes from the previous one. We're not going to use the position ones, so I'm just going to marquee select that, hit delete, and then all I'm going to do is drag this until my first keyframe is at my last keyframe of the previous one. I know that sounds confusing, but hopefully the visuals helped there, and you can see we're starting to make a bit of a staircase with our keyframes. They're going up that way. Cool. So this isn't linked to anything, even though this one's pick whipped to the box. So as you can see, this is box is pick whipped to rotation 1. This one is still independent, which is good. I'm going to press V for my selection tool, and I'm going to drag this holding shift over here and try and hold shift down. It should make your life easier when it comes to rotating the box. I might have to pull that down slightly. That's okay though. There we go. And then once we've done that, all we're going to do is exactly the same as before. We're going to go from rotation 1. We're going to pick whip from rotation 1 to rotation 2. So clicking and holding that, dragging it up there. And now we should have another rotation. Now, because the box isn't a perfect square, we're going to have some anomalies on that final keyframe, and that's okay. We can just hit W. And remember, we're altering the null object, not the asset itself, until we get it to a position that we quite like. Ace. And we're just going to do that one more time. So we're going to hit Control and D, press U to bring up the active keyframes, drag the keyframes again in that stair motion. So last keyframe, first keyframe to the last keyframe of the previous layer. Press V, grab that, put that there, have a zoom in. Okay, zoom out again, pick whip rotation 2 to rotation 3, check your final frame, it's a little bit off, so we'll hit W and just drag that up slightly. That's looking as near as damn it. Okay. So obviously you could go in and you can do your easy easing and that sort of stuff. We'll take a little bit of playing with rotations. Something you guys can experiment with independently. Let's have a look and see if that looks... Yeah, that's looking a bit strange. That it's going to be a case of going in and just having a play with the graph editor, because there's only so much easy easing can really do. That automatic sort of easing, the best results are always going to come from you going into the graph editor, having a play, getting really comfortable with that. So we've got the final rotation there. And I think all I'm going to do is hit Shift and P. and I'm going to have it slide off just there. Okay, so after the rotation's happened, and I'll try and keep it consistent with what we've been doing. So I'm going to hold shift and page down, and then I'll just drag that for ease off the screen like that. Okay, it looks a little bit odd. I think it's because of the velocity it's got when it does slide off, so we can just increase the distance between these two and it should go a bit slower. Still slightly odd, but again, you've got the tools there to have a go at doing this now. The real intricacies will come from playing with the keyframes, playing with the graph editor, so the smoothness of each of the rotations and the movement at the end, you know, the speed at which they lose that momentum. They're all the big things that are going to make something really realistic. But for the purposes of this, I think, you know, you've got a cartoon box being thrown in a bit of a daft manner. Kind of looks fun. Okay, so once again, I haven't saved once during this. Becoming a bit of a running theme for me, that. I'm gonna go there, null objects, call this box null 02. You call yours whatever you want. Hit save, and then I'm not going to forget to do it this time. This is going to about 5 seconds. So we're going to halve this down. We'll hit composition settings, and then just change the 10 to a 5. Hit OK. And that should give us our full animation, and we won't have a load of dead time at the end, which is good. So now we're going to go up again, and I'll keep doing this in each tutorial. We'll go to export, add to Adobe Media Encoder Queue. Wait for that to load up. And then we'll wait for our file to come into here. And then just make sure your settings are probably exactly the same as last time. We will talk about the presets down here at some point, but not right now. Probably the best thing you can do is just go in here, make sure the file name is what you want it to be, it's going into the right spot, and then just hit play. When it's finished, when you've got the tick, just click on your output file and you should have your fully rendered animation. Okay, if you managed to get through all that, well done. Yeah, just keep practicing these, get really comfortable, get comfy in the software, and you'll be a master in no time. All right, thank you very much.